Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to have you for the second webinar of the Antalis Creative Power Award. So this second webinar is in partnership with H+M and is about designing expertise for print excellence. So while I let you all join us, a few words about the Creative Power Award. So this is the Antalis contest that is open until the end of May, where you can submit all your nice projects on all the Antalis portfolio, among them all our creative papers, as well as all the premium grades we are offering. And thanks to our partner, we have many prizes for you to win, whether you are a printer or a designer, including interview by the brand identity, vouchers for H+M, and 1 year subscription to Monetize. Also today, the topic is print excellence and it's about design because we have a special prizes and you can already see the award. It's the first time we are showing it. So you can see the award for the print excellence special prize, which is a really unique category that no one will be able to apply to. You can only apply within the 6 or 7 other categories. And our jury, including Martina from H+M, will review and assess your project based on the perfect execution of the print effect and technical challenge, especially if you have combined various demanding print techniques. And the reward for this includes a meal visit to Arjowiggins, Scotland. So before I leave it to our H+M experts, we have a small poll for you, which will help us know what you're expecting from this webinar, and which will also guide us in providing you with the most interesting content. So I'll leave you a few seconds to answer the poll. So the question is, what do you know about blind embossing and hot stamping? So is it new to you? Do you want to discover these techniques? Are there techniques that you like and you know, but that you would love to use and know how to use them? Or do you just want to increase your expertise because you've used them before and you just want to know the latest trend and you want to know as much as possible? Or you just want to remain up to date? So I leave it to
the poll was not active.
Bernd.
So if you want to relaunch the poll, it was not active.
It seemed like there was been a small issue with the poll. That's the issues of live event. Sorry for this. I will try to be a bit faster. But at least now I see people, you're all answering very fast. So now I leave you again like a few seconds. So it seems so far that it's pretty new to you, or to most of you. So it's great. Our experts will really guide you through discovering this technique. So you haven't all answered, but we'll move ahead. Thanks for taking the time. I also invite you, while the answers of some are finishing to answer, I invite you to stay to the end of the webinar, where you will have the opportunity to request a special notebook manufactured with a H+M die. That's it. So let's end and share the result. So Martina, Bern, I let you introduce yourself, but be aware that 40% of our attendees, they don't know much about the techniques. And I let you go full screen and tell us everything you know about blind embossing and hot stamping. Perfect.
Do you see our screen already?
Yeah, that's perfect. We can
Perfect. Go. Okay. So good afternoon and welcome everybody to the H&M webinar. We are really happy that you take the time and spend with us the next hour here for an introduction into stamping die technique. First of all, my colleague and Bernd, we want to introduce ourselves shortly. My name is Martina Hahn-Rodig. I'm since more than 30 years in the stamping business. I started my career with Kurt's company in the foiling business. And since more than 20 years, I'm now with H&M in Göppingen in southern Germany here. I'm responsible for this customer service and for our overseas subsidiaries. And perhaps you introduce yourself as well shortly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also from my side, hello everybody. My name is Daniel Meyer. I'm at Hinderer Mühlich since 34 years now, and I'm working here as a sales manager responsible for, let's say, for Europe, more or less.
And our graphic expert.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, let me start with our presentation. I want to start with our small agenda that you see what we are talking about the next 30, 45 minutes. First of all, a small, really small introduction about what is H&M, what we are doing. Then we have an overview about the stamping effects, what we can offer, the different effect from flat to relief stamping and so on. And then the next thing will be how to define the patterns and textures. How do we do that? And we will explain how you can implement that in your designing. Then a few words about the preparation of the artwork and how to bring here the stamping effects in your projects. And last but not least, the sustainable aspects about hot stamping and about our dies and so on. So let's start shortly. Let me start with a few words about H&M. We are a producer of, for the graphic feed, mainly for brass stamping tools. And for the plastic industry, we are producing silicone dies and jigs for them. So we are in both worlds at home, so the graphics and also on the plastic industry. Founded as a company in 1966 from Mr. Mühlich and Mr. Hinderer.
Difficult name, that's why we say H+M, that's easier.
Yeah. The headquarters is still in Göppingen, which is in Germany. We have different production sites in all over the world, more or less, in the US, in France, in Switzerland, Italy, in India, and in China. So worldwide, we have around about 190, 200 employees working. We are together with Kurtz since 1971, so it's a long time partnership together with Kurtz. And since 2014, we are 100% Kurt's daughter.
Okay, that was a quick look into our history.
Yeah.
Now we are coming more closer to the dies. So H&M, yeah, our message here should be, we want to be more for you than just a die supplier. Yeah? We want to accompany you and your projects and make you benefit from our long experience. Like Bernd said, the company exists since 1966. So that means we have more than 50 years of experience in the stamping industry. We have very close cooperations with machine manufacturers in the graphic field, with many paper manufacturers. And so we really could gain a lot of experience in the industry. And we think this is beneficial for our customers, if it's converters, if it's designers. We gathered a lot of know-how during that time. So what can we offer to you that is more than just producing a stamping die? Yeah. It starts with workshops, for example, that we can organize with you together, stamp workshops about the stamping possibilities. This can be online or on site, and we can help you, or it's our interest that you discover the possibilities that stamping is offering. If you have a project that is perhaps already more concrete, then do not hesitate to contact us. We will be happy to have a look to your project upfront before we finally produce the die, because sometimes we can give you recommendations how to prepare the file, if your ideas are feasible in hot stamping, or what has to be changed to make it fit for hot stamping or for embossing. Ideally, if the project is already rather concrete, the converter could be present as well, because in a stamping project, it's also important on which machine do we stamp, on which substrate do we stamp. This influences the final result of the stamping project. What we can offer as well is that we analyze your artwork upfront, and that we tell you, is it then feasible for hot stamping? And if not, what has to be done to make it fit for hot stamping? And we think that this is really a valuable contribution and service that we would like to offer you to get the best results for your stamping projects. So now we have a look to the different stamping dies that we can offer here in H&M. We are starting with the basic type of a stamping die, which would be the die for flat stamping. Flat stamping means that we just transfer the hot stamping foil to the paper substrate or to the cardboard. The motifs are quite different, so it can be a large area, it can be a logo or a symbol, it can be very fine details. What all these motifs have in common with flat stamping is the stamping remains on the surface of the printed material. And the stamping lives from the difference or from the contrast between the glossy foil and the matte background. Yeah, the paper or the cardboard is not changed. We really focus here on the transfer of the foil.
Yeah, but maybe I can add one word. We are always talking about transfer the foil. We are doing not transfer into. In reality, we do not transfer the foil. Of course, the foil is still the carrier is still on the base material. We just transfer this lacquer on the substrate.
Yeah,
so we are always talking about transfer the foil, but this is in reality is not true. We just transfer the lacquer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we focus for these flat stamping dies. We really focus on the optical effect. Now this sounds quite easy, but sometimes it's also challenging to have a flat stamping die. And I think here we can have a look to some very nice examples. So the challenge with the flat stamping die can be that we have extremely fine lines, for example, or we have negative areas. And if you look here to these negative areas, this is not a bad stamping. We made this deliberately in order to show you that hot foil stamping tends to fill in negative areas. So our expertise is that we would open these motifs so that we really get a beautiful open negative area and that the foil doesn't fill in. Of course, there are some limits here that we have to respect when we set up the data file. Yeah? And our rules here in H&M says if we have a positive detail, a positive stamped line, then we should have a minimum thickness of 0.1 millimeter. And if we talk about negatives like here, then we should have 0.2 millimeter. If we get a data file from you that does not consider these values, then our programmers or our DTP department will work on the file and will adapt it to the necessities for hot stamping. So this is part of the service that we can offer to you. Yeah, then we are coming to the embossing dies. Embossing die means that we have a deformation of the paper and we create a haptic effect. And I think that that is something very important because a haptic effect means it seduces the consumer to touch the product. Yeah. We are working a lot here in H&M with embossing dies, and probably we see every day 50 or more embossings, but still after so many years, if we have a nice embossing on the table, we want to touch it. Yeah, and the same feeling surely has every consumer who has a package in front which has a haptic effect, which has an embossing. So it really seduces to touch. And if you touch a product, then the impact is much higher than just looking to it. Embossing dies, if we want to make an embossing, we do not only need a die like we have it for the flat stamping, we also need a counter die, because when we want to deform the paper, we have to press the cardboard or the paper into the embossing of the stamping die. And for this, we need a counter pressure, which would be the counter die that you see here. Yeah. The challenge for embossing dies is to define the right execution of the embossing and, of course, the embossing depth. And this is something that our programmers are very experienced in. So they will decide on basis of the paper weight, on basis of how the motif looks like, and on basis of the stamping method that is used. So is it up and down or is it rotary? By all these elements, they will define how the execution of the die looks like. The counter die must, of course, fit perfectly here to the die. And although it looks identical here, if we look to the pictures, it's not really 100% identical, because our counter die is a little bit smaller than the die, because between counter die and die, you have the paper stock. And we do not want to squeeze the paper. Yeah? For a perfect result, it's optimal that we have a so-called paper clearance. And that means that the counter die is a little bit smaller than the die in order to give space to the paper. So these are invisible little details that you cannot see in these pictures, and also the converter will not see it when he gets the dies and the counter dies. But these little details are really important for a perfect stamping result. Yeah, when we talk about embossing, it's very important that you do not think only about a round embossing. So what we see is that I would say at least 90% of the embossings are round embossings. Yeah, That is the standard type that you see here on the first picture. But please, when you have a project with embossing, remember as well that there are many other types of embossing. So, for example, you see here a prismatic embossing, or we can have an embossing where we stamp as well the outline of the motif. There is really innumerable possibilities how to execute such an embossing. And I think this is a very nice example here for this cahier motif. So in the upper here, you can see how the motif looks with a round embossing. And here we have made it with a prismatic embossing. So you can see that it has completely another look. And this is something where you really can play with the different relief or embossing types. We would like to put a special focus on blind embossing. Mostly blind embossing goes together with a print. Yeah, so we have a nice print like we have it here in this picture for this cacao bean. And that is now the moment where we here in H&M have to discuss with the designer or with the customer what is the required complexity level of the die. You see here 3 different executions. Yeah, this is the most simple one. So if we just want to give a little bit of haptic effect to this print here, then we would just make a 2-level die and say, okay, we put it on 2 different levels. This part here is on level 2, and this is on level 1, and this provides already a haptic effect. If you want to have it a little bit more sophisticated, we could go for this solution here, where you see that we have, yeah, in the middle picture here, you see that we have already much more details. And then in the even more sophisticated version, we have really every little detail of the print motif. And you can imagine, if you compare these 3 versions, you can imagine that for the first version, the manpower needed in programming and the milling time is of course much less than in the 3rd version here. So for us in H&M, it's important to know what the customer requires. Sometimes the blind embossing is going not with a print, but it's on the pure paper. And then of course, all the details of the motif must be in the die. Yeah? And if you look here to the die, you can see that really the whole texture of this cacao bean is in the die. Because in this case, I do not have a print. I really must show all the details in the die. Yeah, and then we also have to talk about cold foil. Cold foil is a decoration technique that is definitely growing. Although we make hot stamping dies, we do not really consider cold foiling to be a competition for us. We take it as a chance because cold foil stamping is normally flat. And that means for us, it offers a lot of possibilities to enhance the cold foil stamping with our blind embossing dies. And you have here some really nice examples. Oops. Oh, I think we cannot see it anymore. Sorry.
No, thanks, Martina. We already have many questions, and which will be also a good transition and a good time for a second poll, because we had question of what kind of software should I use to prepare a file. So before we go into even more technical information and tips, we are having a poll asking you, our audience, what is the main challenge today in regards to blind embossing and hot stamping? So no, these examples are very nice. We also had question on what kind of paper should I use or not. So we'll cover this part in a while. We had question about the size in millimeter of what can be achieved. You already answered some part of the question, so that's great. So big poll. So let's share some of the results before you can go ahead. So a big third of the people don't know the stocks, which paper stocks are most adapted to blind embossing and all these techniques. So I'll cover this part later. Then question is, they don't know how to set up embossing or hot stamping tip file. So I think it's a perfect time to go ahead.
Yeah, I think we will cover these questions because later on Bernd will explain how the data file should look like so that we can turn it into an embossing or into a foiling die. And he will talk a little bit as well about the different file formats that we can use for the production. Okay. So I just want to shortly finish about this topic here with the cold foiling. We can enhance cold foiling with nice blind embossings, and we have really unlimited possibilities here. Like for example, for this lint packaging here, we have enhanced it with a combination of a sculptured embossing together with nano embossing and with round embossings. So there is really limited possibilities for enhancement. And I will hand over now to Bernd, who will explain you a little bit more about this nano embossing and micro embossing, etc.
Okay, thank you, Martina. Yeah, so as Martina already said, we have different topics of flat stamping, relief stamping, blind embossing, and so on. And the next level, what I always say, it's we can give an add-on with different textures. So as you can see here in the picture, we can do that alone without any relief. So you can see just our standard pattern what we have, and we applied that here with foil and here without foil. So you can easily see the effect. And each of these pattern has a number, so it can be easily indicated in your designing. Just give us your number, so we will talk about later how it works, how you can do it. But of course, this is one of these points what we have to look for. So we can really we have just to think about the paper has to have a little bit
more volume,
a little bit of volume.
Yeah.
As higher the volume, and I would say so if it's less than 150 gram, it's maybe too less to get a good effect for this type, because you need a counter die for that, and you really form the material. So for that you need a little bit of volume, of course. So next, a little bit smaller. This is micro embossing. Really, we have finer patterns, as you can see here. We have much less embossing depths. Of course, we have just 0.25 millimeters here, so in average in the depths of that. So you need no counter for that. Usually, these type will be used with foil, because this the light diffraction you need for these effects to see it better visual. And we have really a huge variety of patterns available. I don't know, even every day we get new patterns here. So at the moment we are talking for sure 700 and more we already have. And ask for a catalog if you have a need for a special micro embossing effects. So next is even smaller, nano embossing. So this is micro, smaller. We have also here a lot of standard patterns with daily new varieties. But here's, for me, it's very interesting. We can produce here brushed aluminum effects or sandblast effects. We will see later on some glossy and matte effects we can produce here. Here, this effect especially works with the light reflections, of course. And best would be to have really a smooth surface which you will stamp on, because the depths of these are just 15 microns. So you can see this is really, really fine details in the toolings.
I think that we should mention that micro and nano are recommended to be used with foil. Yeah. Because it lives from these light reflections, and therefore it's better to have a foil. The textures we have seen, they are also very nice without foil, because we really deform the paper. But micro and nano, of course, you can use a micro as well without foil, but with foil, it's the effect is really much nicer because we have these light reflections.
Yeah, and as Martina shown before, these micro and nano effects, of course, also works on cold foil or also on digital foil. This is no problem to use that with these type of toolings. So next effect is lenticular. So I always talk about flip-flop. So you can see two levels here in one die. So for this example here for the start and the finish is already engraved in the tooling in different angles of the structure, and because of the light reflection you sometimes see start, and then if you flip it then you see the finish. So it just give you an idea. You can also make this visible with your logo or whatever you want to have. We need just a data file with different layers, let's say, not two files, just one file, please, with two layers, so we can really place it on the right place, the effect, just to give you an idea. And let's say the end of these effects can also be photorealistic. So we really need just a 4C photo, and we can bring them in our tooling, ideally with 300 dpi or more. So as better the resolution, as better is at the end the result. And in this example we have here this stamp made with this photorealistic effect, and this works really quite good. I think there is another picture. There's another picture where you can see this photorealistic effect. You can see here also the tooling, and on the right side the tooling, on the left side here the stamped result, and you can see also here these very fine details. Maybe we can go with this here a little bit. You can see it clearly how fine it is, and how detailed the toolings are
executed.
Yeah. So and I will show some more effects which are done with this technique of this nano embossing. So on the left, the red one, for example, is done with a red cardboard, and we are doing hot stamping with a Lumafine gold. So Lumafine, if you don't know it, this is a semi-transparent foil from Kurz. And so you see still a little bit the red shining through. And with our technique of these matte glossy effects, you can see sometimes the Davidoff logo in this case, and And also in these bars, you can see with the structure inside, sometimes better the red and better the gold. So you can really play with that. In the middle, it's the blue one. You can see the gradients of these matte glossy effects. We come in here nearly from 0 to, I would say, 90% structure, and we can really play here with all different things. The right side, the gold, is also a combination of foiling and of embossing, and then a combination with nano embossing, matte glossy effect. You can see a lot of varieties are possible here. So Martina explains how to bring this pattern now into your motif.
That is true. So let's see which options you have for these patterns and textures. The easiest one is definitely that you choose a pattern from our H&M catalog. And like Bernd said, we have presently more than 700 different patterns in our catalogs. So you have really a huge choice here. Yeah. What you have to do is you send us your data file with the outline, and then we can bring this pattern into your motif. So if you look here, this would be your data file, and in our catalogs, you see, for example, here a pattern, and every standard pattern here in H&M has a number. So I hope you can read it. This one is, for example, H324. So what you have to do is you send us this data file here and you say, in the V, I would like to have H324. And in the I would like to have H326 or whatever. Yeah. So by these numbers, you indicate us which pattern should be in which character here of this motif. Very simple. You don't have to create the artwork by yourself. It's already done with our standard patterns. Second possibility would be that you create your own pattern or your own micro embossing. So this is here an example where we did get for a calendar an individualized micro embossing pattern from the customer already. So customer makes the data file and we create accordingly the pattern. And this is then, of course, your individual property. And a third possibility that we would like to share with you, we have the possibility to digitize patterns. That means if you look here to the pictures, we have, for example, this ribbon here, or we have this, how do you call that? This
structure
table, yeah, that you put on the table. For example, this texture here, you send us the sample of the ribbon, we will digitize the ribbon, then we will convert it into a milling program and we mill the dye. And here you see the final result. So you can be really very creative, whatever you see out there and you feel this could be a very interesting texture or structure, send it to us and we will check if we can digitize it and make a dye out of this. So the creativity has really no limits here.
Yeah, it's up to you.
That's it.
What to do.
A placemat. It's a placemat. So, and now Bernd will explain you how you have to prepare your artwork files.
Yeah, this is quite simple. Let's say we usually getting most of our data, which we get is a Illustrator AE or APS file or PDF. For us, it is important that the data should be vectorized. This is the most important thing. So no fonts and so on put in, just vectorize it. Then nearly all problems will be solved. For multi-level dies, which we have seen before, for three-dimensional dies, we need Photoshop data, ideally with a high resolution, 600 dpi or more. So even higher, even better is, let's say, the details which you can get out of the data. For us important, we don't reduce any heat reductions or whatever, just use 100%, let it to us to reduce them. We do it in the right way. Do not put any mask inside, convert all strokes and fill to pass or outlines, or really a vector database, or give them no line weight applies to passes. This creates problems, let's say. Also no intersection lines. I will explain, I think, on the next page what it is. Save the file with layers, so one layer for each file, or if you have a multi-level artwork, please save it on different layers. This makes life much easier. And if possible, of course, specify your embossing style. So as Martina told you before, we can have a round, which is the most common, but even all others of them are possible, of course, and we can create, and we love it really to do something else.
And we can, of course, as well combine. No? We can have some characters or motifs with a round embossing and others with a flat embossing or whatever. So every combination is possible as well.
What we really have to have this is we need to know what is the relief part of the designing and what is the flat, because you have some normally you have a mix of them. So the artwork file, as I already told, save it in different layers. So you see on the left side how is the composite, so it looks together, and you can easily put it on different levels. So you can put here on different types of relief, for example, or different types of layers. What you see, this is level 1, level 2, level 3, or which is a structure, could be integrated. So just give different levels, and then it's layers, and then it's quite simple. So the intersection lines, which I explained, this is the motif which you want to have. So the bullseye in the right way, and you see it on the right side here. What is the incorrect way? So we have really lines, one line over the other, and this gives really problems in the production. And the correct way you see right down. This is the correct way to put such a file.
We need the outline. No?
The outline is the important point. Not even me, all other suppliers need them.
Yeah.
Give me just one example. Again, we have here a picture of a layout of a customer, and we have indicate here different layers, what the customer requested for, and I put it here on the screen. You see on the different layers, you can really easily see which is the embossing, which is the structure, which is the print, and this makes life very easy for us. And
yeah, that would be optimum if we get the data files like this
way,
that everything is separated into layers.
Yeah. So last but not least, as I told,
that's really great.
Okay.
That's great. You're answering the question at the same time that our guests are asking them. So because we had a question about the layers and color and CMYK. So do you need to have this information regarding the color of each layer? It seems like you do. When I look at
the color of each layer is for the, let's say, for the printing, it's not so important for us. But for us, it's important, as you can see here on the right side. If you have a composite of all of them, it's really hard to see what is the foiling, what is the printing, what is the embossing, and so on. And that's why please put all these things here separately, as you see here on the right side. This is the foiling area. This is the structure or second level of or
this is the lumafine. So
foil. Sorry.
the upper one, the gold one, gold one would be the Luxor foil, so a gold stamping.
This is the gold, and this is the red one is a different foil, a lumafine foil. So we can really split it, and you can split it very easily if you have it separated on the layer.
Okay. Also, you mentioned Adobe Illustrator. Can you work with other file from other software like CorelDRAW?
Yeah, CorelDRAW also. So let's say the common programs, of course, we can use also Corel. Important is here, it should be a vectorized file. This is the main point. So let's say the most common programs, we already have that. So, but normally, or most of them is AE or PDF or EPS.
One pretty technical question again. How do you know the order of the layers? So this is also maybe why it's important to get in touch with the designer, gets in touch with you at the beginning to also maybe help him fine tune the file. Because one question from Thomas said, how do I know in which sequence should I order the layer? So this is something you could help him with, for instance, on such project.
I think that has no importance for us. It just has to be clear what is embossing, what is foiling. And if you look, for example, now here to this example, we have, for example, two foil layers. We have the Luxor 385, which would be this one, and we have this lumafine. And if it's not indicated that this is two different foils, then we would put, if it just is on one layer, we would put everything on one die. But since you have two different foils, we need it on two separate layers. And by this, we understand from your file, okay, we need one die for the red foil and one die for the gold foil. But the order is not important for us. It's important for us to understand what is stamping and how is it stamping. Is it flat? Is it blind? Is it foiling and embossing? And if it's different foils.
Thanks. I guess it's all clear now. So before moving to the last part, a small poll again to understand also how does our audience know about sustainability, and are there some maybe misinformation, or what do they know about foil and sustainability or stamping? Because we had some question, so it's really something that seems to be interesting the audience.
Yeah, we also know it from our side. We often get these questions about sustainability, and Martina will, after your poll, or the result of your poll, take over and talk about the sustainability in hot stamping or blind embossing, or also about our toolings, of course.
Right, because one thing is the product itself, and the other thing is how we produce it and how sustainable are our dies.
So you can see, okay, some of the people who answer the poll, they don't know much about the impact, the life cycle of all these tools, the films. So I guess it's you can go ahead and tell us more about how sustainable some choices maybe, or more sustainable they can be.
That's it. So yeah, sustainability is a huge topic now. Everybody is talking about it. And if we look to a hot stamped product, I would say at first sight, a hot stamped product does not really look very sustainable. Yeah. But perhaps we should mention a few facts that show us that it is sustainable. Because if we look to the final product, a final product that has a hot stamping is 100% recyclable and 100% de-inkable. because the decoration, the layers, and I think Dan did mention this right in the beginning of our presentation, we do not transfer a foil. We do only transfer very, very thin lacquers. And in case of a metallized foil, we are talking here about an aluminium layer that is only 0.02 microns thick. So in reality, that's nothing. And even if the cardboard is completely covered with hot stamping, you still can put it in the recycling and in the composting process without any problems. So the final end user who has the product in hand, he can put it in the recycling bin. And then, of course, we have also the side of the converter. So the converter who makes the stamping, he has, of course, these foil scraps of the used PET carrier. And of course, this is a topic that the Kurtz group has taken care of. They have in the meantime developed a system where they take back the used PET carrier, they recycle it, and they make a valuable new raw material of it that later on can, for example, be used for injection molding. So the first pilots are already running in the Kurtz group. I think that this development will now go very quickly in this direction. So just to let you know that Kurtz group is thinking about this topic and working on it. Yeah, and now we come back once more to our blind embossing, because what could be more sustainable than a blind embossing? You only need a die and you just deform the paper. You don't transfer anything to the paper, and you can nevertheless achieve really beautiful optical effects. So our message is really, our focus here in H&M for the future is definitely on blind embossing, because that's the most sustainable technique that we can imagine. Yeah, and the last slide on the H&M dies. Why is H&M only offering brass dies? We produce only CNC engraved brass dies, and we believe that this is the technique for the future. It is absolutely sustainable. We are in a purely mechanical process. That means we are working with brass sheets. We just mill away all the brass that is not needed for the die. We don't use any acids like it's the case for edge dies. We don't need lubricants or any chemical substances. And it's a closed circle. So what we mill away, we are collecting all our brass chips and we put them back in the recycling process. So that means that also the tools for our customers, if they don't use the dies anymore, they still can use or sell back the raw material. There is really no loss in the process. And our dies have really a long lifespan. So when we talk about a brass die, we talk about easily 1 or 2 million stampings per die. So this is in no comparison to an edge die. Yeah, the lifetime is much longer. And therefore, we can really say that this process is absolutely sustainable.
Thanks, Martina and Bernd. And I will move also to some paper question topics, as we had some question, and also a good transition, as you've mentioned, blind embossing. So for sure, creative papers are the most suitable paper, especially if you want to achieve really deep embossing, because of their composition, of their technical specs. So I've listed, shortlisted some of our best paper that we strongly recommend for embossing. So first, I guess the audience know Key Color. So it has one of the highest bulk across the uncoated paper in the market. So that's therefore very good for embossing. Then another alternative is to go for Conqueror Converser because it's 100% cotton and with a long fiber that also makes it really flexible for deep or multi-level embossing. Another alternative, which is also a sustainable alternative, is Conqueror Bamboo, which is made of 50% of bamboo fiber, and the structure of the fiber also really helps for embossing. And last but not least, All in Origins. So this is our latest paper, which is a packaging-based paper. So with a high percentage of softwood, which makes it really suitable for advanced embossing, multi-level techniques, such as multi-level embossing. Some inspiration also on our paper. I will not have time to give you so many tips, but here we can see also some nice projects so from various studios using embossing. So either foil and embossing, sometimes blind embossing and just one PMS offset. And there we didn't mention much about the printer, but it's also really important for the customer and for the end result to really work with the printer, because the printer know-how also is key, especially when you want to have the perfect registration between the embossing and the print effect. It's really key. So one tip also is you always print first. With a question like this, you print first, you do screen printing or offset, and then you go for the embossing or hot stamping. So various projects around the world, so on white paper or on a colored paper. One tip also, what's interesting with combining these techniques is to really be creative and play with a gloss foil, for instance, with a matte paper, as we can see in the middle with a key color. An example from Malaysia. We had some question about the cost in the chat. What's interesting also in combining creative papers together with multi-level embossing or with embossing or hot foil stamping is that you can use various shades of paper under the same tool with the same foil almost. So as we can see the example on pop set, so the design is different, but it could be one design, so one stamping dial, one color of foil, and then you emboss with various color paper, which gives you a variety of outcome while using a single technique, and you don't have all the setups and all the cost of printing and doing runs on each colors. You had the example of the file, and I've mentioned earlier that we have a gift. We'll have a gift for our audience. So we've been working on a notebook for the competitors of the awards, and also for you, if you stay to the end and answer a quick, very short survey. So these were the files that were produced to create a notebook, and that have been turned into really beautiful stamping die. When I look at this, I want to keep it. After a project, I will not want to recycle it and just keep it with a lot of pride. So this is the example of the tools and that have been produced by H+M for the notebook. And I'm thanking you already, and I just check if we have received more questions from our audience. So how do we are? I think we've covered most of the question. In the meantime, people, you can take the details of Martina and Bernd, and also follow H+M online. Yes, we had someone. Could you repeat the minimum line for embossing and reversed minimum line?
For embossing dies, the minimum line thickness should be 0.3, no?
Yeah, minimum.
Yeah, so that we get a nice embossing, no?
And could customer combine risograph printing with nano embossing? So, or I guess it's also suitable for any offset or for color printing. Can you nano emboss onto this, and does it make the effect it could be that could be expected?
Can you repeat the question? If
Can
we can combine nano embossing with
risography, but even with offset, can you do nano embossing without foil, just on print on top of a printed project?
Yeah, we did it already, yeah. But we really have to check how the cardboard looks like, because like Bernd said, yeah, we are talking here about an engraving depth of 15 micron. So if we have a very smooth paper and ideally some shiny or metallized surface, then I think you can get a nice effect with nano embossing. If we go into a more rough paper, the paper structure will completely absorb the nano, since it's so tiny. It's only 15 microns deep.
Yeah, and if we are talking just about printing and nano embossing, I would say then I would recommend and really go to micro, because micro is a little bit deeper and you can see it better. That's why I would recommend to use micro embossing here and not the nano effects. The nano effects really need this shiny and smooth surface.
And to combine it, then because you mentioned rather glossy or smooth paper, in the range we have a Conqueror CX22, we have all-in smooth, and for the metallics effect we also have Astralux. And another question: what is the maximum embossing depth?
Good question.
How far can you go?
This depends really on the substrate. As more volume you have, as more is possible. So if it's a standard and you have already shown your substrates, and as longer the fibers are, as better for embossing and as higher embossing as possible. Otherwise, the paper will crack. So I would say, so it depends. It comes from the maximum where I see is maybe 0.7, 0.8. If it's a solid area, it could be also 1 millimeter. But even if it's small, then it will be difficult. And we have really looked for this project.
Okay, so thank you. I think the time is running, and just to conclude, so I want to thank you both, and thank you also H+M for their support in this project. I remind our audience that there's only 18 days left to submit the project to the Creative Power Awards. We have another webinar coming the 7th of June about sustainability and packaging trends. So in partnership with Positive Luxury. So we'll share with you everything, what are the stakes of ESG for brands, and then for their supplier, designers, and printers, and also speaking about the eco-conception trends. So the webinar will be closed. There will be a small survey where you will have the opportunity to request the notebook that we've teased you with, which will be produced on all-in origins by Atelier Bulk, and with micro embossing and hot foil. So thank you, everybody. Any question, you will be able to reach us on social media as well as our partner. So thank you and have a good day.
Thanks a lot for listening and for giving us the chance to make this presentation. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.